Hi, and welcome to the second episode of Divorce Reimagined, where we help parents just like you navigate through the ups and downs of co-parenting. My name is Stephie B.
And I'm Jacob.
And today's episode is all about the importance of instilling and respecting co-parenting boundaries. So, as we all know, co-parenting can be a real challenge. So, dealing with an ex-partner with whom you might resent, or maybe you're upset with, or maybe they upset you in the past, it can be extremely difficult, especially when the communication has to happen on a regular basis when dealing with the children. So, a lot of the time, when we can't separate our personal feelings from our parental responsibilities and have to have a discussion about the kids, the discussion can be heated, tense, and sometimes even hostile. So, the main reason why this happens is because healthy boundaries aren't set, which can blur the lines of what's acceptable and unacceptable communications. So, we have to remember that once we are divorced, a new dynamic has to be established. We can't continue to communicate with each other the way we would if we were married, especially when things are rocky. After divorce, a new dynamic has to be established, and that new dynamic should mimic that of a partnership where there's a level of respect that has to be maintained to ensure the fulfillment of parental responsibilities from both parties. And when healthy boundaries are established, it can help create a peaceful and respectful co-parenting relationship.
So true.
Right. And so I guess the biggest question is, how are healthy boundaries set? I think like the number one thing is being really super clear about communicating. So all starts with clear communication. And I think it's really just all about being clear on what your expectations are and acting also with integrity. So what you say is backed up by the action that matches the words that are being said. It also requires a ton of patience and compromise, especially when there's personal feelings involved.
100%. I mean, the thing is, a lot of people forget about the patience and the compromise part of communication.
Mhm.
They get into the communication part, but they forget a relationship or any partnership is about patience and compromise. Now, you shouldn't have to compromise to the point where you're doing something out of character, but there's certain things that you must compromise on because again, this is a living relationship, meaning that it changes and things are moving constantly. There's events that occur in the relationship. So patience and compromise are huge for me. And I think that's one of the main reasons our relationship works.
Totally.
Um, you have a lot of patience for me because I have my quirks. I have a lot of patience for you because I mean you have your things. But and again, your lived experience is different than mine. So we got to compromise on certain things. And it comes down to really the way we handle the situations. So when responding, we do it calmly rather than reacting. And that can make all the difference in the world when it comes to communication. And going back to the whole patience thing and compromise, again, they're not compromises in the sense that you're giving something up. You're doing these things for your children. So for the welfare of your children, you're making little compromises here and there. And then sometimes you have to be a little patient with your partner, right? They might not be on the same page as you. So you have to communicate your feelings, your emotions, or your reasoning behind why you're doing a certain thing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think when it comes to the communication and everything, for some reason, whether you're talking to a colleague, when you're talking to another family member, like a cousin, a parent, a sibling, an aunt, an uncle, a friend, there's always that level of respect that we always maintain. And we do that almost subconsciously just because it's part of that dynamic. I mean, for the most part, obviously, there's going to be certain exceptions to the rule, but they happen a lot less frequently than they would, let's say, with a partner, where sometimes you're fighting every day, sometimes you're fighting once a week, sometimes you're fighting multiple times a day. And that can vary. But for some reason, with a partner, it's just part of the dynamic. Sometimes it can lead to almost having that type of comfort to feel that sometimes that can be disrespectful or the communication isn't really about compromising and what's best for the family unit, but rather to exert control over another. So it's just kind of
Mhm.
like once you leave that dynamic, it's a different type of relationship now. This is more so like you're not going to go to a colleague and you're not going to start being out of control, trying to exert power over them and all of that stuff when you're trying to get something done or there's an issue at hand. Sometimes there's going to be times that you might not agree on something, but you have to remember to always try to maintain that respect because now you're not together. It's different. Now it's like you're entering a partnership. And if you enter a business partnership, you're not going to go in and disrespect your partner because your partner is going to ditch you and say you're way too difficult to work with. You can't be like that. You always have to kind of be a little bit more methodical in how you speak to them. And then
Mhm.
to your point with regards to the compromise, I agree with you 100%. The compromise needs to be fair. What it needs to be is not one person feeling like they lost. Like at all times, there should always be that effort to almost feel like both people felt like they walked away winning. So there's that compromise. Okay, this is what I want. Oh, this is what you want. Okay, we're not on the same page. So where can we find a page that's in the middle? So each person kind of sacrifices a little bit, but at the
Yeah.
same time finds a middle ground where it's like, okay, it works for me, it works for you, and then you just move on from there. But I think like when both people are sacrificing and giving a little bit, it shows that there's that effort, and that effort it shines through and then helps to improve that communication. So most certainly clear communication is really, really important, but also
Mhm.
understanding those boundaries and also how you speak to them, like the words that you choose, responding calmly rather than biting their heads off, like maybe using the 24-hour rule, where if the other person said something to you that upset you for whatever
Mhm.
reason, maybe it's all about taking 24 hours to just kind of calm down and then approach the situation the next day in a more calm, level headed manner.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
And the thing is, understanding the limits. A lot of people look at boundaries as like a negative thing because you look at relationships and people say, well, these boundaries are set because your partner is insecure. But the way I look at boundaries are more like preferences. Do you know what I mean? So, like, I have a preference that you not do this with the children. So
Mhm.
instead of like having like that negative connotation to the word boundaries, I think the way I look at boundaries as their preferences. So in our relationship, we have a set of preferences that we designated in the beginning and say, look, these are the limits that we're putting on communications, subjects, methods, the language that we use. And we have these conversations with each other all the time. So we're setting our preferences as opposed to like sometimes when people talk about boundaries, they say, "Oh, these are like a negative set of rules." But again, when we talk about compromise and preferences and boundaries, they all kind of tie into each other,
They
right?
do, like
Yeah.
100%. Understanding your limits and what you're okay with, I think is super important, right?
Mhm.
Understanding your limits is the second thing that helps attaining healthy boundaries. So first was it starts with clear communication. The second is
Mhm.
understanding your limits. And once you understand what you're okay with, it's going to be a lot easier to set those boundaries. But a lot of the time, if you're not even clear on what you're set on, I think that what ends up happening, you just end up getting like all riled up and you're not even recognizing the reason why because you're not even clear on what you're okay with. So I think it's doing a lot of introspection to say, this is what I am okay with, this is what I'm not okay with. But then understanding, like, okay, we can talk about this, we can talk about that. I don't like it when I talk about this, or I don't mind when we talk about this, or the type of language, I don't like it if you speak to me this way or not. Being very set with your limits, but expressing them in a very respectful way. But
Yes.
once you understand your limits and what you're okay with, it's a lot easier to go and express that to your co parent. So I think first it's all about introspection and like figuring out what are your boundaries. That's, I think, the first step before you go and actually even set them is what are you
Yeah.
okay with?
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's kind of like universal boundaries, which come from respecting the other person's space and time. And then there's personal boundaries where there's certain things that are personal that I don't really want to talk about. And those are fine too. We all have those. Now, Things like, what do you do on your personal time? Again, like for us, that was a boundary that we don't really talk about. If it has to do something with the kids, or you're doing something with the kids, then it's my business. If you're going to Wonderland, that's my business if you're taking the kids. Now, if you're going to Wonderland and you're not taking the kids, it's none of my business. So again, it's understanding those certain things that I just don't need to be involved in. If you're taking the kids to the beach, I'm worried. Who are you taking with you in terms of, is there going to be somebody there to watch the kids while you have to go to the bathroom, or while you have to take your eyes off the kids while you're at the beach? But if you're going to the beach on your personal time, when you don't have the kids and you're just going there with some friends, that's completely outside my scope. I don't even ask you questions about it because it has nothing to do with me. These are personal boundaries that we set for each other. I'm going out on a night where I don't have the kids, you never ask me where I'm going or what I'm doing.
Oh, for sure.
And
I
I
mean,
have the same
you're
respect for you. And again, these are compromises or boundaries or preferences that we set in the end of our relationship, where we transition to the co-parenting model. And I think that's important, because a lot of parents don't really go into talking about these boundaries and preferences at the beginning. They kind of say, well, we'll just deal with them when they come up. But again, for me, I think you need to have these boundaries clearly stated and clearly defined at the end of your relationship. Sort all the stuff out and then just live your life.
Yes, that's exactly it. I think like what the difficult thing is, and for us, we kind of got it. I don't know what it was. Like it's really tough when you're coming out of a marriage. Obviously, the marriage is personal. There's two different levels. You have the personal level and then you have the family unit level. The personal level is like that interpersonal relationship with the person. So clearly there's feelings there. Feelings or emotions can take logic completely out of a conversation, situation, all of it. Emotions just make people do crazy things, act in crazy ways, or whatever the case is. But at the end of the day, as soon as emotion is involved, that's when things get messy. So it's like, to your point, after you end up getting divorced, if the person wants to go out on a date, the other parent shouldn't care. I know so many couples that it gets really, really messy as soon as they ask questions like, who is it that you're dating? Who are you going with? What are you doing? It's none of your business. To your
Exactly.
point, it has nothing to do with you. This person is not married to you anymore, and they have the right to continue living. They have to find a way to keep going. So at the end of the day, just because the marriage is no longer, it doesn't mean that life stopped. So it's just understanding this is a new chapter, new dynamic set. And there's certain things, there's certain boundaries that need to be respected. And also to your point as well, you and I never really talked about the boundaries. I think we were just kind of on the same page. We never really talked about it, but we never really crossed that. We just kind of understood like, okay, like this isn't my business. I can ask you if, let's say, for example, I don't know, if you're taking the kids to for a weekend somewhere, like you said, for sure, I want to know where you're going, where you're taking them,
Yeah.
what you guys do. But I mean, if you're going to Vegas with your buddies, have fun. It's not really my business. And it's just
Mhm.
kind of understanding that. And it's just trying to keep, especially at the beginning, if you want to start it, because at the beginning is probably the hardest when you're trying to establish a healthy co-parenting relationship, just talk about the kids,
Yeah.
but don't make anything personal at all.
Exactly. And that's the thing. For us, yeah, at the beginning, we didn't really set clear boundaries and rules. But I think because our relationship was kind of, we had a strong relationship in terms of we were very friendly with each other. So we liked each other's personalities and stuff like that. It was just that the marriage wasn't a good decision for us. So for us, I think it was easier to kind of say, these are some basic rules, and then let's develop them as we move along in this new relationship. So that's why when I say we have a living relationship, what I mean is it's constantly growing and changing, but staying within those boundaries.
Exactly.
So there's certain things that come up in your children's life that are kind of related to time, right? So when you have a 6-year-old, there's kind of like different rules and regulations. There's certain things we're more interested in. But again, as the children get older, those rules or boundaries change. So when a child is 13, the child can stay home alone, no problem. Now, if a child is 8 years old, even if you're stepping out to take a dog for a walk, for me, that's kind of like a preference where I don't want that to happen. And then again, that's an example of a boundary that changes over time. That for me, that's a personal thing. When I was a kid, I used to stay alone. I used to go outside when I was like 5 years old, no problems. But today we just live in a different world where customs and expectations are a little bit different.
Mhm.
But when it comes to dating, that's one of those things where it's difficult. There's a lot of emotion involved. So it's one of those things that at the back of your head, you just got to understand that life is now this. It used to be that. And you got to go with the flow and respect the other person's experiences and time. Respect the fact that they want to have a life. Now,
Yeah.
as soon as that crosses the line where your children are involved with this new parent, or sorry, this new partner, then I understand that it's a different set of boundaries. So
Yes.
at that point, when you start dating somebody that's serious and you bring them into your life, I personally think my preference is that I would understand who this person is. I don't necessarily need to meet them, but I need to understand who they are, because they will be around my children.
Of course.
They will
Yeah.
be sleeping over. They will be in the same house as my children, maybe sometimes alone. And this is a normal thing. When my children are alone somewhere in somebody else's house, I'm worried. When they go over to their friend's house, I'm worried. Who's going to be there? What are they going to be doing? Stuff like that. So I think
Mhm.
it's natural when your partner moves on and decides to date somebody new. Then I think it's one of those moments where the living relationship needs to live in a sense that it needs to change a little bit. That's where
Yes.
compromise comes in. That's where patience comes in. And then I think the partners need to talk about that kind of stuff. I would say, like, listen, I'm going away for the weekend. We're going to this person's cottage and I'm going to introduce my children to her. So I think that's fair. And then that's where you need to use all your skills. There's going to be a lot of emotions involved. There's going to be a lot of, maybe you need a 24-hour rule where you just take some time apart if you don't think that it's good timing or whatever. But again, that's why communication, patience, compromise, boundaries make the relationships work as opposed to not work. It's the way you come out at the end of a big change, like a new relationship.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think also the boundaries and knowing your limits and understanding your limits, I think when you're able to communicate them clearly to people and forget about just in co-parenting in life. It's
Mhm.
just the better you are at communicating your boundaries and what you're okay and what you're not okay with, the less likely you are to be offended and to be upset and for your ego to get hurt and for you to start acting from a place of ego. Now it's like, okay, it's already been established. I'm okay with this. I'm not okay with this. So now the other person knows if I do this again, I am now entering a possibility of a hostile situation. Do you know what I mean? All of this also requires proper intention. I mean, it's really nice to sit there and talk about clear communication, understanding your limits, all this stuff, but it all starts with intention. I was thinking about this last night. I was thinking about just human action. I'm actually got three magazines, two of them talking about the power of positivity, and then another one talking about the brain and all that stuff. And intention is the key to everything. How do you determine if you should truly be upset with somebody or not? There's a few levels to an action. You have the surface level, which is what the action was. Then you have the motive, and then you have the intention. And the underlying intention literally needs to be defined by one of two words: good or bad. That's it. The intention is not complicated. The story of any rationale or reasoning intention can be found in the motive section of the action. But that underlying intention, is it coming from a good place or not? You can't say I'm having clear communication and act from a place of sourness. You can't have those vindictive thoughts and those tactics for manipulation. I'm going to try to get them to say something so that I can, whatever. That's not clear.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? It's all
Yes. And
about intention.
yeah. Exactly. And that's the thing, when I explain our relationship to a lot of people, the way I describe it is when you have the argument or when you have a conversation, we go into it like a good faith argument.
Yes.
So we're walking into it with good faith, which a lot of people don't. It's
Yes.
sometimes people walk into having a conversation about children welfare. The conversation we had like 2 days ago about our children maybe not eating as much sugar as they should. I'm not coming in with a chip on my shoulder. You're coming in with good faith. So I'm going to come back to you with good faith.
Hmm.
And I think is so important where if I was a different person, I could have looked at it as you attacking me,
Yeah.
thinking, why is she talking to me about not giving my children too much sugar, trying to take a little bit of sugar out of their diet, maybe limit it to once or twice a week to go for a sundae, or maybe when we get a sundae, we get the small instead of a medium. If I was bad faith, I would have walked into a conversation and said, wait, what are you trying to say? But
Hmm.
look, our relationship, I always try to look at everything as a good faith argument. So when you come to me and say, hey, listen, Jacob, I've noticed XYZ, and I think we should do ABC. For me, I'm like, okay, we are going to have a good faith argument and talk about what we should do in this situation. And again, I never take things in a negative way. Some people would take it as an attack, but we never do that to each other, which is so important. And again, that comes with the patience and the compromise.
Yep.
If you're having a bad day, when we're having a conversation about something that has to do with our children, that's super important. This is the way you got to walk into that conversation.
Exactly. Yeah. Like that's the whole thing. It's like those good faith arguments. First of all, you can't go in and attack the parent. That's
Mhm.
not something that you want to try to do at all. Because also, it's that integrity, just understanding like why you're bringing it up. It's not a me against you, you against me. I want to control the
Exactly.
situation, vice versa. I want to have more say. It's about honestly what is good for our kids or and you vice versa. We always make sure that we're on the same page. Even if we're not on the same page, then we start kind of going back and forth. Okay, so what are you okay with? This is what I'm okay with. What are you okay with? This is what I'm okay with. Okay, then why don't we find something in the middle or whatever? And then trying to find ways. For example, we all know that parents aren't perfect. I'm not a perfect parent. You're not a perfect parent. None of us are perfect. I don't think any human being is perfect. And I think there's always room for improvement in everything. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's also recognizing coming from a place of like, I'm not coming after you to tell you that I'm a better parent than you, or that I know what I'm doing over you, or I'm better, or this is what I'm trying to tell you. No, it's understanding that I have room
Mhm.
for improvement, you have room for improvement, but it's not really about me or you. We have these two little beautiful
Yeah.
children that really all it is to make them happy, healthy,
Yeah.
have this amazing life and this great
Yeah.
foundation.
A lot of couples today, they'll look at co-parenting as like a zero-sum game where somebody always has to win and somebody always has to lose. I think in the beginning of our divorce, I
Mhm.
think we weren't as good faith as we are today,
Well,
right?
I think
Because
we were coming out of of a divorce. We
yeah,
just ended
so
our marriage through
difficult. It's
sourness.
difficult though.
Really, of course it
It's
is.
it's not an easy thing. I know me and you today, we look back at our life and we think the last 5 years, the last 6 years, it's a work in progress. And again, that's why I keep on calling this like a living relationship in terms
Mhm.
of that me and you, okay, we grow every day.
Of course,
And
yeah.
and ultimately it's kind of like the pot at the end of the rainbow is our children. So the most important thing is my relationship with you is to make it work for my children.
Of course. That's
Okay?
exactly what
and
it
and
is.
and again, these are things that the listeners will have to understand that they come with time. You're not going to be first day
Yes.
and then with so many fresh emotions and anger and your view on life is so jaded by this thing that you just experienced that
Yeah.
has destroyed you, like sometimes financially, emotionally, mentally. So yeah, it's not going to be something you're going to have in the beginning, but it's a goal that you have to set with your partner,
That's
which is what
exactly
we
it.
did. In the beginning, it was hard.
Mhm.
And then over time, we learned with experiences and understanding what my ultimate and your ultimate goal is to bring up our children in a healthy, happy environment.
Exactly. And that's the whole thing. To your point, it's 100% true. It is a living relationship. Don't think like him and I had it at a 10 out of 10 at the beginning. I want you to know that that's not true. Both of us had our own, like we were both jaded. We were married and then we broke up and there was a lot of stuff we had to figure out. And there was emotion, there was resentment, there was anger. Really hard to not let that get in the way. So it's not perfect, but to Jay's point, it takes time. As the time goes by and that resentment starts to kind of be put into the back of your mind and your focus, moves towards the kids. And
Mhm.
it's this understanding this person's going to be in your life forever. And it's
Yeah.
definitely like a living relationship. Don't ever think you're ever going to have it always 100% figured out because our kids are changing, are growing every day. There's new situations. Everything
Yeah.
could be fine one minute, the next minute, something could not be fine.
When it comes to communication, it's matching energy. So if you're aggressive, you know, that your partner will be aggressive. Now,
Yeah.
you walk into it and you're of good faith. And when you want to talk about your partner might be mad at a certain
Mhm.
point, but eventually they will match your temper, matching emotions. So if
Mhm.
you're talking to someone who's good faith, eventually you will become good faith. And I think that's what happened to us. In the beginning, you'd be emotional one day, I would be emotional the next day, and kind of thing. And then we just matched each other's emotions.
Yeah.
And I
And
think that's where we got to today. And again, the communication thing is so huge on a weekly basis. So that's what I'm saying. Keeping it on the up and up is so important.
mhm. And
This is
that's it.
like I don't talk to you once a year or once every 6 months. I mean, we're constantly communicating
We talk
on a
every
daily
day.
sometimes.
We talk and sometimes 4 or 5 times a day.
Exactly.
Like we talk a
Yeah.
lot. We talk a lot.
Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the kids' life right now. It's summer, we got camp, we got some activities that they need to do, they're learning, stuff like that. So, I
Mhm.
mean, there's always something to talk about, really,
Yeah.
right? That's why we keep it up and up. We're always trying to communicate, having good faith conversations, watching our boundaries, compromising, patience, understanding, mutual respect for each other. Those are the kind of things that you need to work towards to have a healthy relationship for your sanity and your children's sanity. It's not even just for your children, it's also for you.
For sure. And I mean, I think it's also a perfect segue into the third point. So, I mean,
Mm,
how to set healthy boundaries. So, we said clear communication, understand your limits. And then the third is respecting each other's time and emotional investment in regards to your child.
mhm.
So, it's understanding, respecting those limits and establishing those good boundaries. It also having that integrity and matching your partner's energies and all that stuff also
Yeah.
comes with respect, like understanding that like your partner, like you created a child with your
Mm,
partner. Your partner loves your child, wants to be
mhm.
there. And so at the end of the day, if your partner wants to be involved in the kid's life, think about whenever you're making decisions, how would you feel if the other parent was holding certain things over you or using your child almost like a bargaining chip in order to try to manipulate you into getting them to do what you want. Understanding that the other parent loves the child and that love for a child, no matter what is going on between the two of you, it can't interfere with the children's relationship with the parents because that's a completely separate relationship. The child's future depends on it. How they turn out, the security, all of the choices that they're going to make in life, how they're going to behave, how they're going to develop those interpersonal relationships really all stems from the relationship in the home. And
Well,
it's great for both parents to be involved. And it's
mhm.
understanding that the other person, if you're emotionally invested in your child, chances are the other parent is emotionally invested in the child too, especially if they're saying, I want to be there 50-50, I want to be there and I want to be present in the kid's life. Who is the other parent to say, no, I don't want you to be in my child's life? Is that good for the child? Is that good for the child?
Yeah, absolutely not. But that's
There's
the
all,
thing.
oh, sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
sorry, Steph. I was just going to say, I mean, that's
Oh,
the thing. A lot of people sometimes when they have so much emotion and resentment towards their partner, they sometimes forget what's the most important thing, which is your child. Uh, One thing with with your partner, if she's or he is not happy, they are not being a good parent. So I want you to be happy,
Mhm.
because I know at the back of my head that the happier you are as a person, the happier my children will be. So again, it goes back to the whole hurting, using your children to hurt your partner. It doesn't make any sense, because what you're doing is you're hurting your child.
That's
Right.
exactly it. I mean,
Yeah.
both parents contribute to the child's upbringing
Mhm.
in different ways. I mean, there's so many benefits to having both parents there. Both parents
Mhm.
contribute differently. And I think the child just comes out more whole and feeling like they're not missing anything. So a lot of the time, it's understanding the biggest thing is to not mix your personal feelings with the relationship between parent and child. Those are two separate things, but they get mixed up all the time. When it comes to the welfare of the child, I don't mean to sound insensitive, but nobody really cares about what's happening between two parents because we're not the important ones. It's the children. Who cares if you and I had an issue where we weren't able to get over it and all this stuff, and we had really big like resentment, all this stuff. At the end of the day, we have our children. We have to separate that. That's one
Yeah.
thing.
That's why I think it's better to, in those scenarios where you can't separate the resentment that you have towards your partner, it's something that you have to do though, because if there's resentment and hate in your heart, right, it affects every aspect of your life.
Mm.
So hatred and depression affects everybody. It's like you got to keep that stuff in check. Now, if I know that I'm purposefully being disingenuous or whatever towards you just to get a rise out of you, then who am I hurting? I'm not hurting you. I'm hurting my children,
Exactly.
because subconsciously you're going through a lot of stuff and you're emotional and you're this and you're that. You're not in the mood to go out, maybe take the kids to the park or go to Wonderland or take them to the beach and stuff like that. But when you're happy, you're more willing to do these things with your children. So for me, like, I don't understand how partners sometimes want to hurt each other or hate each other in any way.
Well, that's the thing. It's just because they end up crossing those lines of personal issue with partner versus parent and child relationship. Those are, again, two separate relationships. And because we're the parents and we
Yeah.
basically control the child's lives to a certain degree, like where they go, who they're with, all of this stuff, we can't let our personal feelings interfere with decisions that need to be made with regards to the children. So, for example, one of the things that I hate is custody payments. When people use their children as bargaining chips for custody payments,
Mm.
you don't give me money, you don't get to see your child. Deal with that, however, which way people deal with that, and that's fine. But there is an interference with the relationship between the parent and the child, and that's not fair to the child. I understand that both people don't have to like it, but at the end of the day, that's a separate issue. And when people start holding payments and money and start using the child as a bargaining chip without respecting that emotional investment that the parent has in the child, that's not fair to the child. The only person that you're hurting is the child ultimately, and also the other parent, but more importantly, the child. That's what the whole thing is. This is the whole point. We can talk about it from an egocentric perspective where we focus on our personal feelings and our personal animosity towards that person, but we have to think bigger.
Yeah.
When we break up, we're still a family, no matter if you like it or not. You're a family still. You always will be. That was something that the parents decided to do when they had a child. They've made a commitment forever from that person's day one until the end of time. They are a family. That was a commitment that they chose. So just because a divorce happens, the family might look different, but you can't
Mhm.
break the family. And you can't break the family because breaking up a family is not good for the kids. You have to just reestablish that dynamic, establishing those healthy boundaries and being clear with communication, understanding the limits, and respecting the emotional investment of the child is only going to help create a more secure environment and a happier and healthier environment for the kids, where a lot of kids, when those personal feelings get muddled up into the aftermath of the divorce and the new dynamic, a lot of times both parents might not be seeing the child equally or spending the same amount of time with the child. And I guess the question is, who's suffering? Who's
Everybody.
suffering? Who's suffering? Like at the end of the day, when we're not whole, regardless if we're living in the same house or not, when we're not whole as a family unit, the child doesn't grow up whole. They
Yeah.
grow up with feeling like they missed out on certain things. And that's not fair. So just because parents can't make it together in a marriage, there still should be that ultimate effort so that as the child grows up, they're not feeling like they're missing things, missing that family, missing that togetherness, missing those memories of going out for dinner, going on a family vacation, doing all these certain things. These are memories that you build. And how you build them is all dependent on creating a healthy relationship with your co-parent, how they live and how they build their relationships in the future, being in a marriage and with their friends and the way how they perceive the world. All of that is going to be so impactful on their outlook on the world.
Definitely. And again, a lot of people want these amazing relationships, and everybody can have them if you follow these rules. That's why boundaries, I think, are so important.
I think they're key.
Okay. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
To a healthy relationship. And we're not just talking about co-parenting, we're talking about in every kind of relationship, really.
Yes.
If you think about it. So you could have an amazing relationship with your ex-partner. Okay. You're not going to love her. The effects that she had on you mentally or physically or whatever, they're always going to be there. But for the children, you could have an amazing relationship by just doing a few simple things, setting those boundaries. So important. Open communications, respect for each other, just a little bit of respect. You don't have to respect them like you love your partner, but you have to have a little bit of professional respect. Right?
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Like it's more personable than a business or a colleague type of relationship, but that's how you have
Right.
to enter it. You're not going to go in like you're unhappy with your colleague. Say you're working one day, your colleague makes a mistake and screws up and upsets you. You're not going to go in and you're going to start saying, hey, jerk face, blah, 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 blah. There is a
Yeah.
certain way of going into that environment and attacking that problem. Because if you go in there, calling the person names or disrespecting them, you're going to get fired from your job. This is the same type of thing we said in the first episode. It's a better relationship than a colleague type of relationship because it comes with a friendship, it comes with a certain level of trust and all of that stuff. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, yes, you have to go into this when you're talking to your partner. Think about, how would you talk to a colleague at work? Would you go in there and start insulting them and start trying to pull things behind their back so that you can win in certain things? If you act like that and you go into that relationship or into that situation with that mentality, you're going to get fired from your job and you're not going to last very long because nobody's going to want to work with you.
Again,
So
it all goes back to prioritizing your child's welfare. Okay, over personal feelings, which is what we talk about. We talk about, at the end of the day, we're on the same page when it comes to our ultimate goal is your children's welfare, their happiness, their love for life, stuff like that, which are so important. And we're not saying it's easy. There's a lot of falling and getting back up, but it's one of these things where if you get to a certain point, it's better than any kind of partnership you can ever have. Like, for example, Steph, you need to go away for training. You're going to be gone for 3 days, 4 days. When you asked me, can you watch the kids for these 4 days? I stepped up away and said, no problem.
Yeah.
I'll take care of it. This is something important in your life. You're training for a job. You're training for this promotion. So what kind of partnership? You can't ask a coworker, oh, can you watch my kids for 4 days?
No, for sure.
Right? You can't ask
100%.
her, hey, can you watch my kids for 4 days? We're not saying it's simple, but if you follow these rules of clear communication, understanding your limits, the importance of prioritizing your children's welfare over your feelings, having good faith when you communicate with your partner, you can turn this into an amazing relationship for your own sanity, not just for the other person's sanity. Now, when you do all these other weird things using the children's bargaining chips and stuff like that, there's no winner. There's absolutely zero winners. Father loses, the mother loses, and the child loses. If you try to set what we're outlining here as your ultimate goal, and this is where you want to be in your relationship with your co-parenting partnership, everybody wins in every way. The child wins because they get better parents. The father and the mother win both because mentally they're more stable. They're not arguing. They're not walking around depressed and miserable because they have all these problems in their life.
And it's also nice, for example, when there's less animosity and less hostility within the co-parenting relationship, just being a single parent home is hard. Everything is hard. The finances, bringing in the money, everything's so expensive, inflation, trying to manage certain things or whatever the case is. And if, for example, like certain situations come up, knowing that when you establish that healthy relationship, it's that reliability that you create, that flexibility in this partnership. When it comes to taking care of these kids, you have a partner to make sure that you're doing that with, and that relationship is healthy.
Priceless.
It's so amazing because it just takes away one less stressor of being a single parent home, because you're not really alone when it comes to the kids. You have a partner, and it makes all the difference. It makes everything so much better, and it makes the experience a lot better. It just makes the lives of the children so much better. So what are some of the things not to do? So we've talked about the 3 things. Now, I mean, in addition to the 3 things, before we start into what not to do, so clear communication, understanding your limits, and importance of prioritizing your child's welfare. But just to add in 4 more little points. I always say there's 4 pillars to being a person. What I mean is the 4 cornerstones to any interpersonal relationship, which is honesty, integrity, loyalty, and respect. You have to maintain these. In order for this to work, you need to have honesty, integrity, loyalty, and respect for your co-parent. If you break any of these pillars, this isn't going to work. It's not going to work. You have to make sure that, like you said, you act from a place of good faith. If you act from a place of good faith, if you back your words up with action, if you're honest and respectful, and you have that sense of loyalty to the family unit, you have a really good shot at creating a different type of dynamic where the relationship or the co-parenting relationship is positive. It's not looked at as a negative, dreary type of thing.
Exactly. Matching your partner's energy. So again, and the way you do that is you set an example. So you put the energy levels that you want your partner to reciprocate. You do this at work too. You do this in any environment. Now, if you walk in all aggressive and stuff like that, that's the kind of energy you're going to get back from people.
Exactly.
So I think people forget that you can't badmouth the other parent, period, to your children.
Yeah.
So I think that's very important because a lot of couples do that. They say, oh, ask your dad to buy that for you. He doesn't buy you things. Or get your dad to do that to teach you how to tie your shoelaces because he doesn't do anything else. You heard those before, people complaining about their partners not stepping up, really.
Yeah, for sure. So under what not to do, the first thing, bad mouthing the other parent to the child. Don't do that. Don't talk bad about the other parent to the child. That's one. The kids look to the parents like superheroes, and you don't ever want to taint that image.
Exactly. It's even not healthy to really talk bad about them to other people too.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Because it's kind of like those things where if you talk to your best friend and say, oh, Jay's like this and he does all these things, I don't like this, I don't like that, you're putting those in your world.
Yes.
So you're making them happen.
Good point.
Yeah. So that's why for me, it's just like, there's no reason for me to say anything bad. Like, even if you were a bad person, I still wouldn't say anything bad about you.
No, for sure.
Right? There's no reason to. When my friends ask me, like, oh, how's Steph? I'm like, fine. And they're like, how's everything with you guys? Like, between you guys? I'm like, we're making it work.
Yeah.
Every day we take it day by day, but we make it work. I never say anything bad about you. And sometimes there is bad things to say. Understood.
Thanks.
Perfect. There's never anything bad to say.
Oh,
But I
thank
mean,
you.
we get into those moments,
Of
right? We have
course.
those moments.
Yeah,
But again, it's just like any other relationship. People who are happily married have those moments. So,
totally.
people who are co-parenting like me and you can have those moments too.
100%. There's going to be times where things got
Mhm.
heated or whatever, but at the same time,
Happens.
because it's not
Happens.
perfect,
Okay.
because as you were saying, it's a constant work in progress. When we're talking, I don't want you guys to think that we're like, oh yeah, we have the answers to everything. No, 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 no. It is not easy. It is not something to just say, oh yeah, it could just happen just like that. All you got to do is snap your fingers, 1, 2, 3, and you're going to have a very healthy co-parenting relationship. It takes work, effort, all of these things that we're talking about. And like Jay said about bad mouthing the other parent, not only to the kids, but to people around you and all that stuff, it could taint the way how the other parent is perceived as well. After that happens, you go around, you say bad things about the other parent. That what ends up happening, those people see you, they're already starting to get this image from that other person's perspective. And now the energy that they're giving back to the other co-parent is just, it's not even positive, and it's not really a welcoming environment, especially when there's going to be scenarios where we have to be in the same room together. We're going to have parties, we're going to have weddings, we're going to have all these different scenarios. We have to be able to just work together. So yeah, bad mouthing the other parent, definitely a big no-no. Don't guilt the child for spending time elsewhere. So let's say, for example, the kids are with me, and let's say they said, I want to go with daddy because of the fact that daddy's going to go to this Pokemon thing, and I want to go with daddy. Okay, go. This is what you want to do. It's not a personal thing. It's all about what the kids want. It's not a big deal. At the end of the day, don't ever put that stress on the child in a position where they have to choose or feel guilty for spending time with the other parent. Ultimately, it's not about me. It's not about you. It's about the children. That's the second thing. Don't pass messages through your child to the other parent. That's a huge thing. Don't use your child as a messaging bottle. Don't bring them into the middle of the argument. Again, causes a child unnecessary stress. We think that children don't stress out. They don't have the same capacity as adults to stress out the way we do. They don't have the cognitive ability to stress out about the things that we stress about. But in their world, there are stressors. This is something they do not need to worry about. They have other things they need to worry about. Their marks at school, what's happening in school, what's happening out on the playground. Those are stressors that a child can handle. Things like interpersonal issues between parents, it's not something that is within their scope, and it's not a position they should ever be in.
Exactly. Children should not be burdened with adult responsibilities. It goes back to like having like a respectful communication model. So if in a co-parenting situation, you respect one another, then you can communicate those messages to one another. So for kids, relaying messages maybe sometimes isn't the best method, and you should always feel comfortable communicating with your co-parent. Like there shouldn't be a reason why you would need to send a message through a child.
Yeah, I can't even think of one possible scenario.
They don't need to be involved in that kind of stuff.
Like if you have something that you want to say, just pick up the phone and contact your other co-parent. That's it. And just say, or text, or whatever the case is.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So that's why we do it. We send messages through text. That's big for us. Right?
Yeah, for sure. And then last but not least is don't rehash marriage problems with the children. So, I mean, a lot of the time when there is issues in marriages, obviously there's going to be one side, the other side, and the truth. A scenario can be perceived in different ways through different eyes. Everybody's approaching a scenario with their own personal set of beliefs, experiences, and their own perception of the world. So whenever there's scenarios that are happening, we're going to be talking about it through the way we saw it. So because of the fact that the end result ended up in not being able to solve the problem, it's not really conducive to the child to have to get into the nitty-gritty of the interpersonal issues between both parents. It's not to say that they can't know the truth about the divorce or whatever the case is. It's really nobody's opinion as to what can happen. But at the end of the day, it's just putting them in the middle and just consistently
Mhm.
rehashing it and talking about, let's say, your feelings about the divorce. Your child might not be the best person when they're young, like 2, 4, 5, 6, 10. I think it's good to stay away from.
Mm.
Eventually, as the kids get older, I think eventually those questions are going to come up. And I think that that's a fair question. But I
Yeah,
think delivery of that information is crucial because you also have to have respect for the fact that the child has love for the other parent as well. And it's all about how you want
yeah.
them to perceive the other parent.
That's what it's really about, though. Rehashing marriage problems with your children, like it places them in a position where they feel caught in the middle and are forced to almost like they ask questions like,
Like they have to choose almost,
yeah,
like they have to pick a
important-
side, who was
yeah,
right,
we,
who was wrong.
and it's important that we shield our children from those kind of details. They're the complexities of adult relationships. And again, it goes back to providing them with a safe space to express their feelings and concerns, that they're loved by both parents. Our children had a lot of questions. And again, it goes back to like the same thing, like mommy and daddy, they loved each other and then things changed and they're better, they're happier.
Like these are questions that come up randomly. These are questions that the kids are consistently thinking about. It's delivery. It's how
Yeah.
you say it. It's putting them in a position to not have to choose sides. It's
Mm.
basically taking ownership and recognizing that both people contributed to the divorce and just basically saying like much to the way how you said it. When mommy and daddy were together, we didn't get along a lot. We used to fight a lot. And
Yeah.
we found that we fight a lot less when we're not living in the same house. And I think that it's better for you guys to have parents that are friends than parents that are always fighting.
That's the thing I told them too. I said, listen,
Yeah.
mommy and daddy are better people. We're in a better headspace when we're not together. The way they rationalize it is like, oh, wow, okay, my dad is a better version of himself because he's happy. My mother is a better version of herself because she's happy. So for children, it's hard to understand why people get divorced. For them, it's just why can't you just make it work?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
a very basic thing, but there's so many complexities. And again, going back to not bringing the children into complex adult situations, I think is important. And divorce is a very complex adult situation.
Yeah, for sure.
So when they get older, I think we can have longer conversations about why we decided to get divorced and stuff like that. But I think for an 8 and a 10-year-old, I mean, it's a little too complex. So I think we had a great conversation here about boundaries.
Yeah, 100%.
Um,
All right, guys. So just to recap, the key to a healthy and positive co parenting relationship is that ability to set those healthy boundaries. And in order to set those healthy boundaries, you would need to have the 3 following things, which would be clear communication between both parties. You need to understand your limits, meaning what you're okay and what you're not okay with. And you also need to respect each other's time and emotional investment in the children. A few things that will sabotage the foundation of that co parenting relationship are things like bad mouthing the other parent, guilting your children for spending time with the other parent, passing messages along through your children to the other parent, and rehashing the marriage problems with the children as well. Now, above all, everything has to be done from a place of good faith. If you walk into a co parenting situation or an issue that needs to be resolved, as long as you go into it with good faith and understand that everybody is acting from a place of good faith, then you will start to notice that that relationship will slowly start to evolve into a more positive one. And with that, I think this concludes the second episode of Divorce Reimagined. We hope that you found this episode informative and valuable. And if you would like to get in touch with either myself or with Jacob, please feel free to connect with us by email at info@divorcereimagined.ca. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you next time, guys.